the auditing section of the Green Footsteps Guide. We've got the wonderful Simon Evans who's going to be leading this session because he's by far the best expert that I know in this stuff locally. So he's here to do this bit. I'm just going to screen share very briefly to just show you the section of the guide that we're going to be talking about today. So if you just bear with me 2 seconds, and if you can let me know that you can see that, that would be great. You see it on your screen? Yeah, amazing. So this is the Green Footsteps Guide, and we've already done the introduction into it, so I'm not going to go into that. But we have, as you know, broken the guide down into multiple subject areas, and alongside those which people have said they might need more support on, we're doing these lunch and learn sessions. So today we're going to be working on audits, which is quite a dry topic. So having listened to some of Simon's work before, he's very engaging. He can certainly make this more interesting and exciting than me. So the audit section here has lots of hyperlinks over into other places. It's a bit of an overview snapshot, but what Simon's here to do is to talk to us a little bit more in detail about how we get going. So if you're happy, Simon, I'm just going to hand over to you, if that's all right. Thank you.
I don't think ever in my life I've been called a resident expert in anything, so this is a first. I work for Truro Penwith College. We have a projects team. Projects are fairly diverse. Cut to the chase, I run a project here which is called The Future is Green, FIG for short. And the idea is that we try and join the dots between the new future skills that are needed, whether that's around construction, whether it's around renewable energy, whether it's around how we deal with our transport issues, etc., etc. I try and join those dots between the kind of things that we can teach here at the college and actually what someone might expect to be able to move into as far as their career in those kind of areas. But we also look specifically at green training, and by that we've introduced into our suite of products climate literacy. Now, it's becoming a more widely known piece of work. It's a relatively short course. I deliver this course on behalf of the college over a period of 8 hours. Because we're a college, of course, I give people homework and I give them some pre-course learning materials. So it probably ends up a good between 8 and 10 hours of somebody's time to try and absorb some of the basics about the pieces of the elements, if you like, about where we find ourselves today in terms of climate change. I became a trainer possibly 2.5 years ago. In fact, only last week, I climbed up the trainer certification process within carbon literacy to have a certified trainer status, and actually some of that allows me to do some of what we're doing today, because you're actually allowed to go through the process of training external organizations as well as individuals and so forth. It also allows us to tailor carbon literacy training to a particular audience. So if you have a sector that's mainly engineering, we can tailor a course. If you have a sector that's mainly commerce or business, we can tailor a course. We actually have a course here which is tailored for education for very obvious reasons. So that there's a wide variation of course material that we can get our hands on. It's produced by Manchester Metropolitan University in conjunction with the Carbon Literacy Project. Carbon Literacy Project is a trust. So these two institutions have combined their resources and they produce this material. This material, the training now is global. It's not just a UK based, it's certainly not just a Cornwall based. In fact, one of the people that I was working with last week on this program was sitting in a beautiful village in, I think it's pronounced Puglia, on a hilltop in Italy, which quite clearly they have slightly different issues to the ones we have as regarding climate change. So it's good to hear from different people from around the world. The material itself is in these days when we've got to prove what we're talking about. Where's the evidence coming from? Are we happy that it's validated? The material itself, as I say, is produced through Manchester University, and every piece of material that is used, you can go back to the source documentation and the research and the validation for it. Not going to do that now, but where people do question, because let's face it, it can be controversial. There is source material to go back to so that you have some credibility and credence. And if anyone else at any future point wanted to pick up some of the material and consider delivering themselves, I can certainly help with tracing back to some of that documentation. As I say, to give the training some credibility. So what I'm going to do, only because Kirstie and I practiced this when we met once before, is I'm just going to put on a very, very short video. It's actually of the BBC, God bless, and they went through a process of training. And if I can do this without too much trouble, I'm going to share my screen.
Make sure you slide the include sound thing over that we both.
I've just got that.
Amazing.
We had a little practice this morning. I truly did. So here we go. Let's see if you can pick up on this. It's very short. Put in the chat if you can't see or hear.
If anyone says, is there any good courses coming up, I will always say go on the carbon literacy one, because it's actually fun. I really enjoyed doing it.
You learn a lot about how you can reduce your own impact, and then you can think about how you change the impact within the BBC.
It's good to be the leaders in making the change and pushing forward, and it's really positive thing to be pushing forward with as well.
It raises awareness, which in turn will bring their costs down because people are being more cost effective, but overall it will bring them in line with obviously the government guidelines and generally the guidelines for the planet.
It kind of blew my mind a little bit, changed my perception of what climate change actually is. And just made me think about a lot of things differently, the way we work and the way I kind of live at home as well.
It makes people in the BBC think about carbon literacy before they're going to go and do a big project. I think often it's probably an afterthought, so hopefully if they do the course first, it'll be at the forefront of anything that they plan in the future.
There'll definitely be the morning session where you'll think, why are we here, what is happening, we're all just terrible human beings, but then you come out fighting fit and ready to take on the carbon world.
It gave us the context about what the problem is, both at the BBC level and globally, and then some real practical take-home things about what we could do about it.
If it's a cause that you don't think that you're particularly passionate about or know a lot about, I'm sure that you will care a lot more about it after you've done the course.
You're not asking a lot of time to deliver such a big message, but what you're doing is creating a spark within your teams that can deliver so many benefits to the business, both financially but also bluntly from a public PR perspective as well.
If you're going to be making documentaries about global warming and the effects of carbon, then you as a company need to be doing your best to tackle those effects. So by putting staff like me on the course, we can do our best to then implement changes as a programme is being made.
It's something that I've always been interested in, but it actually gave me that boost to keep being interested in it and not just sort of forget.
Not only did I actually learn something, I think it actually changed the way I view my work and my personal life as well, and I think people come out of there feeling quite inspired to make a difference in the world.
Really helpful, and just for everybody's benefit, myself and Simon have been talking about when the next dates are released for carbon literacy training, this 8-hour session that Simon mentioned, that we'll actually put those on our website, so you'll be able to go and access and sign into those.
Absolutely. Let me just turn the
Oh my goodness. We do love the beavers though. That's my next continual professional development training, is going to go and learn about beavers, which I'm very excited by.
Yep, beavers, lovely.
I think we've got them in Cornwall now, maybe. I can't remember.
We do. We've had our first rogue beavers as well on Bodmin Moors. So we've got some actual deliberate projects, and then we had some rogue ones, which really ironically, there'd been a group there for a long time trying to get permission to put beavers on site, and then they literally magically appeared, and it made them look like they put them there, but they hadn't. They really hadn't. It was just wonderful timing from the beaver population.
Yeah, I've been asked recently. We've taken some of our FB, our 16 to 18-year-olds from the college, onto 2 different water conservation and water management events, and we've got them literally testing the quality of water in different rivers here and around Cornwall. So we've taken, it's probably coming up for 80 students now, environmental scientists and our geographers, and trying to get them out practically understanding the issues to do with water. And they all want to see the beavers. So yeah, that's my next trick. There are obviously 1 or 2 organisations in Cornwall that will help with that regard, and I'm looking forward to being able to do that during the course of the next year. So the BBC then they took on, as many organisations have, the Environment Agency have 8,000 of their staff trained in carbon literacy. The BBC took it on, as you can see. Those are their, I believe, heartfelt comments. Interestingly, the operations director from the BBC was, very kind of complimentary about, what it meant for him personally, but also across the organisation. And I understand that they are continuing to roll out carbon literacy to many of the others here. We're doing that here at the college. If you think about us as just another institution. We sat down, it's January of last year, with our senior management team, governors, principal, directors, and we had a full day's carbon literacy session with them as well. So you can see the kind of, not just individual thoughts, but also what it could mean to an organisation, a charity, a trust, any kind of organisation as such. So hopefully that couple of minutes there. Shall I just give you an insight into, rather than covering some of the material? So we look at some of the very well heard commentary about climate change. So it's a literacy training program. So you might wish to understand some of the terminology. So, quick fire round of what's the difference between carbon neutral and net zero. What is the greenhouse effect? How does it come to be a thing? Why do we use that terminology? We then have a look at some of the gases themselves that we, through the what is known as the Anthropocene, when we've been about for quite some time, what kind of gases are we really concerned about? And obviously the big player that we all know about in that is carbon dioxide. So we examine where is it emitted from? What part of our world is producing it? And why can't we do something about it? What is it that it's connecting carbon dioxide to the perceived warming of the planet? So we have a look at that in some detail, but we mustn't forget some of the other gases that we don't know about, we don't see. They are not inconsequential simply because they're available in smaller quantities. So we might have a look at the CFCs. We might have a look at methane, and we'll have a look at those gases, see where they're emanating from, and again have a look at seeing the kinds of things that we might be able to manage better than we have been, arguably since one or the other of, I think there are 4 industrial revolutions that we've gone through. Of course, the initial one being burning fossils, but we've also gone through you know, the oil revolution, and more recently, arguably, we're going through a renewables revolution. And I think it's important to make sure that we understand the changes over that, you know, last 150 years. So we'll have a look at the basic science behind climate change. We'll have a look at some of the drivers of that. We'll have a look at the gases and see what some of those issues are, and to a certain extent, what is it that we've been able to do to tackle those? Some of them are obvious. Some of them started, as we were saying earlier, down at Delabole. So I'm going to say, I might be wrong on this, but 25 to 30 years ago, probably. I remember that quite a lot of work was being done in Wales near Abu Dhabi as well when I first went on a school trip there. So this is not as new as we might think in terms of our understanding. Certainly where renewable energy is concerned. So if we have an understanding right up to and including the kind of sources, then where do we as individuals fit into that mix? Are we causing the problem? Is global corporations causing the problem? Is it just us as a consumer? Is there some way we can change our behavior? Can we change the behavior of our bigger corporations? Many people would say, well, absolutely not. And in the current political climate, arguably we could be going backwards. Is that a concern in the short term? Is there some kind of urgency around the actions that we need to take? So we might then spill over into having a look at something a little bit more specific. And if I can tee up the slide, I'm just going to show you one of the kind of slightly, it goes back to what they were saying on the BBC video there, that the morning session can be a bit grim. You're looking at the problems, you're looking at the difficulties, you're projecting forward to see where this might take us. Whilst we might introduce some of the material from the Intergovernmental Panels on Climate Change, whilst we might introduce some positive responses to climate change in that, actually, I think the afternoon session where we start to look, what would we like to see in the future? So if I just put up a couple of slides, and then maybe we'll have a little chat about those to see what people's views and opinions are. So just bear with me while I yet again try to do this. Okay, there's no sound on these, so it's a little bit easier. There we go. So we might have determined that agriculture is one of our difficulties, and the material identifies which aspects of agriculture create problems for us. So, you know, I think we've probably all heard of the problems of ruminant cattle and their ability to belch out methane at a great volume. We know that industrial agricultural processes require materials on the land which have not only a negative effect as far as climate change is concerned, but also, of course, as far as the environment is concerned. And there's a very strong connection between those two aspects. So one of the things that we might consider is, let's take ourselves into the future. Let's write to ourselves in the way that people like to describe in Hollywood movies, and let's talk to ourselves about what we would like to see that is different. What is it about our future that we would like to see is different? So here you can see we have a card. Now, normally in a class environment, I'd give out a number of cards to people and ask them for their own comments. But let's just, in the time that we have a little look at this. So imagine you're writing back to yourself, let's say 10, 15 years hence, what are you going to write? And here is some examples of the things that we might hope to see. So I'll just go through it. I'll just paraphrase that. The average diet in the UK is now healthier, more varied, sustainable, and that's interestingly down to a mixture of legislation and education. There's a trend away from obesity, and that's no longer a health concern, and that's to do with better diets, lower fat, salts, and sugar. Advertising restrictions have come in. Junk foods are being junked, and we're all looking at a better balanced diet. So there's a greater understanding of health food choices and the benefits of nutrient-dense foods. So this constitutes a healthy diet, but also significantly means people are eating significantly less red meat, particularly that of beef, lamb, pork, and chicken. So there is a number of things that are happening here, but reducing those reliance on red meats is going to lower the likelihood of us having high fat contents in food, but it's also going to lower our carbon footprint. And we would have a little game in here to show what the different carbon footprints of different foods is. So we would take similar levels of protein, whether that's in beef or chicken or soya, other plant-based foods, and we would then try to rank those according to their carbon footprints. Not that hard. Anybody who's read any book by Mike Berners-Lee will know that he has come up with a way of determining the carbon footprint of just about everything. You as an individual, you as a business, you as an organization, and he would track back to find the carbon footprint based on transport of food, production of food, and the associated manufacturing issues related to food, and also, of course, making those distinctions between the different types of food. So, some of that work has been done. It's been fed into, coin a phrase, fed into the data and statistics used in this material, and you're able to actually compare. I'm going to say apples with apples, but let's say beef and soya, beef and chicken, lamb, pulses, etc. We can actually do the numbers and data on that. So back to this sheet here, we're looking at farmers are growing a wider range of crops more directly for human consumption. So there's less going on with less growth of agricultural products for animals, and interestingly, they also, writing back to themselves here, they're saying that animal welfare and meat quality is also improved. Small amounts of crops are only needed now for feeding livestock. And of course, the reduction in livestock farming has reduced water pollution and enabled better protection of the UK's green spaces. So along with the climate aspects to this, the health benefits, which of course one of our big problems today is the cost of our health services, the environmental issues that we are managing along the way as well. So I'm hoping that, come the afternoon in this training, we start to delve into some of these aspects, which hopefully will give people a more positive understanding of the changes that can be made. Has anybody got any comments on that?
Do you have access to the tools where you could capture that? I'm just thinking of some of our organisations that do work with food and the Food Network.
Yeah.
perhaps some of our children, young people and families organisations, that it would be really useful to have some links sent over to how you calculate that carbon footprint of the food that is being utilised by the organisation. Might be really helpful.
Yes, I'd be more than happy to share some of those things. There are certain limits about the material, as you'd expect with intellectual property rights and so forth for the material. You kind of get a license, if you like, to use some of the material. But actually, the data and the information behind these is readily available, and I'll share some of that. So that aspect was food. Whoa, travel and transport, similar kind of thing here. If we have a look at somebody writing back there, then how you manage your holidays, how you commute. There are health benefits, obviously, for using more direct routes of public transport and walking and cycling and so on and so forth. Again, those health benefits come through. There's additional benefits to reducing our carbon footprint in the way that we travel around. We got a little game. So we know that, and actually looking back at that map there, I can see the plane going from Newquay Airport down to Alicante. I've got a little game kind of set up. We know we can work that carbon footprint out for one person or 4 people. I hope nobody's ever done that trip. I'm to be honest, I haven't, but I'm planning on it. We can look at the carbon footprint of that journey, and we can look at all the alternatives, whether we go by our own vehicle. What kind of vehicle is that? Does that make a difference? How many people are going to travel in the vehicle? We can actually look at the carbon footprint of going on the ferry, by the Channel Tunnel, and using public transport train services. So we get down to southern Spain through, by trains down through France and so on and so forth. And interestingly, on this particular slide, it does actually say, rather like the slow food movement, slow travel for leisure has become popular, with a focus on as much as the journey as the destination. So, there are other ways of looking at our kind of the way that we spend our leisure time, and where can we look to reduce our carbon footprint while enjoying different ways of managing that. I did notice, went down to London 2 or 3 weeks back, and sides of the train, it's actually got the carbon footprint that you've saved by taking the train all the way down to Paddington from Cornwall. And I thought, more of that, please. Let's see these numbers. And actually, if you book tickets for trains through GWR booking site, again, they give you those numbers. Unfortunately, holiday companies using aircraft won't do that. But I'm ideally hope that one day they will be asked to produce these numbers so that they're much more in evidence when you actually end up booking your holiday. Has anybody got any examples of where they have run into numbers around a carbon footprint of travel at all? Has anybody seen anywhere?
So I don't have numbers, but I do that flight from Newquay to Alicante because my dad lives just south of Alicante. So I do it once a year. But what I've noticed in the last probably 3 or 4 years, that you can now pay for carbon offsetting, which I know obviously has some challenges, but you can pay additional money. It does tell you what the carbon footprint of your individual journey, how much baggage you've got, for example. We always do hand luggage only. But so they are starting to integrate it with some transport providers. I mean, obviously there's a whole conversation there around greenwashing and stuff, like how much of that actually is being offset, etc. And we all know we shouldn't fly, but my dad lives in a different country, and I'm time poor, so it's very difficult to get the train and the bus and the boat all the way down to see my dad. But so it's interesting to me that they are integrating, and obviously some of these big presumably some of the biggest people that are creating this issue, the airlines, are starting
Yes.
to actually talk about that as part of a standardized booking process.
Absolutely. I used to have a colleague up to a few weeks ago. He's moved on now back into the engineering world, and he worked in the aircraft industry. He was forever going on about the new fuel types that are being used, and what they called what did he call it? There was a particular phrase that he used to use, but it was basically by just putting enough fuel in an aircraft to get it to where it needs to go, but not carrying more than it actually needed, because obviously aircraft companies like an aircraft to land, not spend too much time in the ground, so they probably carry around more fuel than they actually need, but there's a cost to that in terms of their carbon footprint. So he was coming up with all sorts of ways for the aircraft industry to try and address some of those issues, which I found quite fascinating, and I had no insight to before. But yeah, it's interesting to know that aircraft companies are starting to look at some of these things. What I would say about carbon literacy, it's absolutely not judgmental in any way. If you are a frequent traveler by aircraft, if you are at the high end in terms of being let's say a high meat eater, you live in a property which doesn't sport the latest technologies for improving thermal efficiency and using renewable energies, etc. That's not an issue. This is a little program of activity about just dishing up what some of those issues are, and hopefully to make us, as we go through our daily life, aware. And once you're aware, once you've got some of the statistics, some of the data, you might be able to make small, tiny little nudges in your lifestyle to make some kind of difference. For me, I have also to go to Spain in about 10 weeks' time, and I've been looking at all the various alternatives, and actually within the normal permitted annual leave requirement that we all find that we have, it's very difficult to do alternative forms of transport. You are left with the convenience side of transport, which of course is about, in many cases, the time taken, and so we are limited to those. So hopefully that gives a kind of a flavour of we examine how we got here. We look at the basic science of climate change. We examine some of those causes, but we do actually also look at what kind of changes that we might be able to expect as well. So I'm just going to put on a little, if I can do this. I don't know whether I can do this without unsharing and sharing. Let's see what I can do. Can you see IPCC on the screen now? Yeah. So I'm just gonna play. No, I'm not. I'm gonna go back. Stop sharing. Share. Yep. Okay. Otherwise, I wouldn't have got the sound back on. And having spent so much time trying to do this properly. So this, I mean, most people will be aware of the IPCC. There are dozens of videos about which describe some of the work that's going on. This one goes back in time a little bit, but I think it's quite entertaining. But it does describe some of the worst aspects, but also some of the work of the IPCC, which I think is valuable. Let's see if I can just play this for you.
Great. It'd be really useful to have some examples of how we can how we can audit some of that stuff ourselves. So I think it's important that we know practically what we can do. Now we understand the challenges that are really quite wide-reaching, aren't they?
I would absolutely agree. And where do you start? You know, it's accepting that we do have the tools now to look at our own our own carbon footprints. In fact, one of the exercises that I ask after the first session is that people go home. I usually split the training into 2 sessions, and amongst their homework is looking up the World Wildlife Fund, having a look at their own personal carbon footprint using the calculator that's available there, and then we'll have a run around the room and ask folk what their numbers are. They all come out with a number, and I believe numbers are the root of everything, quite frankly. And once you understand what your number is, you've got something you can target, adjust, aim for, and quite often it's a revelation to people, not previously having understood where their carbon footprint sits compared with those of their colleagues in the same room. I find that quite a valuable exercise and a good talk. Has anybody else done that here? Have anybody had a go? Yeah. Were you shocked or were you happy?
I've done it a few times over the years and watched it change as my habits have changed.
Okay.
But I'm impressed by like the ease of use of that particular tool, and I think it's a good one to give to people as a basic introduction to things like that. I do quite like it for that. But yeah, my own carbon footprint, I'm doing okay. It's lower than the average, but there are still things that just feel unavoidable, like having a car down here. Like I can't afford an e-car. An electric car, not yet. I'm looking into it. So and you just can't live in Cornwall without a car.
No,
it's very difficult. Very difficult to do so.
That was a challenge I rose to last year. But you're right. It's they're very expensive. Not so much the running cost, but the capital cost of buying an EV is quite harsh, quite frankly. And they are starting to tumble. I believe you can get Teslas for quite cheap at the moment.
The ones that aren't recalled or set on fire. I don't think I'll be buying one of those. But
me neither.
The option now for people is the lease option, which it does make electric cars available, but it is buying into the global system of leasing everything from billionaires, which is not.
That's
a very good economic model, personally.
And the second problem with the Leafs, out of all of them, is they have a completely different charging port, because I do have an EV, to the national standard. So I always feel really sorry for the Nissan Leaf people, unless they're changing it. But they often have rocked up to the EV charge stations, and they can only get on a slow charger, 7 kilowatt, not the 50 ones. Right. So that it might be more affordable, but it's more difficult because you do need the network to work properly.
I was saying about leases, like not lease. The lease system, because you own it for 3 years, but you don't really own it. But lease cars, and the lease model is now the way of doing it. But it is just renting from people who control those things.
It was interesting to learn the other day, amongst other things, that how many of our new cars that are sold are on the mobility scheme. And I wonder what thought has been given. I think it was something like a fifth of all new cars on the mobility scheme, but I wonder how many of those, given that it's a program where there would be some government funding into I don't understand the complete complexity of the funding behind it, but there was some government funding going. What thought has been given into making sure that those vehicles, in the main, are low carbon vehicles in whichever way, whether they're EVs or whatever? Because that's where
they've massively increased it, because I'm a mobility scheme, because I'm invisible disabled, and they have hugely increased the EV availability, and there is now funding to get EV charge points put on your house as well. Only if you have off-street parking.
That's really good to hear. It just struck me that these are where some of the levers of either national government or local government can pull those levers and make those significant changes. So that's really good to hear. I'm hoping there's some policy directive, in there somewhere to try and make those kind of things happen. That might be something that you'd want to put on your own personal postcard for 10 years hence, and look back and see that those changes have kind of happened. So there are some really positive stories, and I'm almost always interested to hear people's personal experience of some of those positive stories in the way that we are managing this transition to a low carbon future. There is plenty of work going on. Sometimes we only hear the bad news, but I do try within this training towards the end to focus on the good news and make sure people come away feeling positive, and that their changes, whether they're tiny, individual, within a community, they're the people and places that they work in and with, or whether it's more, kind of organisationally, let's take the Environment Agency or the BBC as examples, where they're significantly trying to change the culture and philosophy of the way that they deliver.
Well, so Genevieve, you organised something the other week about EV vehicles and the schemes that we have here. I learned quite a lot from that, and it was just getting people along who've gone through the process to talk about how they've been through it, and what they've gained from that, and that was quite useful. It's made me think a bit more about my options for the future.
What was that course, Jen? Can you explain it all?
That was just an informal lunch and learn for colleagues in the council. So I was just trying out a session because on our Viva Engage group on Teams, there was some interest in a session on that. So we had 2 colleagues sharing their personal experience, and then someone from Tusker, the company that does the lease things for our car benefit, so our employee car benefit scheme that the council has with Tusker. There was someone from that company just going into a bit more technical detail, but it was just super useful to hear 2 people's personal experiences. And one of the people had just done a quick calculation before the session on how much he had saved since having the vehicle, and he hadn't done that full costing before it was just before that session. So, and he said that charging at home, because it's of course more expensive to charge at public charging points, but he calculated that he had saved about £9,000 in total over 5 years or something, which is a significant amount for people, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree. And when I got my EV, the extra money it cost me, it took 6 months for me to be back to zero again, and since then I've been saving money. So for the same reason, it cost me about £7 to charge it fully at home. Most I've ever paid is probably £40 on the big motorway chargers, but by comparison, for a 300-mile range, still a huge saving financially. And that's the thing about some of this stuff, isn't it? We all want people to be doing it for the right reason, but actually if you can use that hook of it's going to also save you money at the same time, I think that's definitely a tool we need to utilise as well.
Yeah, but of course with the leases you need to have there's a threshold for your salary and all of that, so it's still definitely out of reach for vast majority of people.
Yeah, of course.
I think he said that it's probably above like £31,000 salary to qualify for it. So given the salaries in Cornwall, that's definitely out of reach for a lot of people still.
Yeah, agree.
We can only hope there's some parity in the future between internal combustion engine and electric vehicle cars. Speaking as an older driver, I just find an electric vehicle so much more simple to drive. It just reminds me of my Scalextric set when I was a child. Basically, it's just one real. Yeah, it's just that simplicity as well, which having grown up with gearboxes and so forth, but also some of the fact that they don't have any fluids in them. There's no oil in the end. The servicing is relatively inexpensive because you're not having to change fluids. You haven't got to throw old oil away. There are all sorts of ways in which it's not just the energy itself. There are all sorts of ways in which an electric vehicle. The secret will be how we recycle them in the future. I think that I don't really understand enough about the ways that you give your, let's say you've done 150,000 in your EV and the battery is degraded, I don't know, maybe come down to 50%. What happens then? Where do those materials go? Are they put back into the system?
They're never going back into landfill, are they? Lithium prices are high enough that they will rip that car apart. Like, I'm surprised people wouldn't steal them as they are. Like, I don't think we've got to worry too much about the recycling of EVs. People want that very much. Because the lithium doesn't turn into anything else. Like, it's still there.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, they'll want those materials more than they'll want a fossil car's materials. It's just rusty old steel and stuff polluted with oil. No, they want they want what's in an EV.
I mean, something that came up as an issue was having garages available to service the vehicles anyway. So that was brought up as an issue, and that's a thing linked to your future skills side of things as well, is having more, say, mechanics trained in servicing electric vehicles.
I agree.
Yes, we have a level 2 and a level 3 in servicing, diagnostic and repairs here at the college, and we're trying to beef that up because, as you say, the industry needs more technicians who can manage that. And interestingly, and I didn't realize before we got this project going up just over a year ago, that we have a level 2 hazard management course. So those people that rock up to an incident by the side of the road, whether they're paramedics, ambulance service, fire service, police, they've suddenly come across some technology that has critical issues with it that are quite different from an internal combustion engine. So how you manage a car that's badly damaged, how you approach it, how you deal with it, how you recover it, how it eventually, it's recycled, is fraught with issues and dangers, but they are different from the vehicles that those services have become accustomed to. So we're putting on courses for those public sector organisations so they can see the kind of changes and what to expect. And of course, we have got examples of a badly damaged electric vehicle ending up in a recycling centre, and 3 weeks later it's set on fire because it hasn't been managed appropriately, and because it has materials in it which is still, active, and the potential for it to kind of self-combust. So the new technologies, particularly in vehicles, comes with issues. Some have said when I've they've been in the class, that's the same with food. We're changing our food sources. But are we happy with all the food choices that are replacing some of those foods that we may have traditionally have? Some people not so. So we have to be measured and thoughtful about how some of these changes occur. So that's this is just a flavour of the kind of things we're able to do through our carbon literacy training. Has anybody got any questions? Anything else they would like to see? Is there something burning that you feel you might like to, because if I get a bit of advance notice, I can always include it in training and stuff.
I don't know. I think I'm a very solutions-based person, so I'd like to see what you can do, understanding the difficult stuff already, like what can you do. Interesting, I've just done my WWF thing. I've done it for about a year, and mine has gone down again, like just while we've been talking. It's gone down to 7 tons now. It was about 8.5 or 8.7 last time, so that's good.
That's a good number.
Yeah, it's below the well below the UK average, apparently.
Right.
UK average is 8.4 apparently. Absolutely. So I was a little bit higher earlier. So actually, I think stuff like that would be really useful. Having the dates of when you've got your next funded training available would be extremely useful. Because obviously this is just a flavour of the sorts of things you'd look at. But actually those practical, how we implement that would be really helpful.
Yes, of course. We're just scheduling up for the kind of new season, as it were. I think I may have said, Kirstie, that when we met briefly before, we'd only just been announced that we had some more funding for another year, and so we were kind of wrapping up that first year's funding, and we're just about, now that we've got some funding, setting off for the next 12 months. So I will certainly do that. Just on that what was I thinking? Oh, you mentioned about your own footprint, a low figure. Do you have some technology in your home?
So I'm in a council house, so I can't get insulation, I can't get solar panels yet, anything like that. I've been with a 100% green energy provider for quite a few years now. Obviously I've got an EV. We're now I was always composting, but we now have food waste, for example. I've got water butts, all that jazz. We eat as local as we can on a budget. So there's a lot, and I've changed the way that I travel. Even though I've got an EV, I do still use trains quite a bit. Particularly for work related stuff, and I am very committed to only one flight a year, if that. But obviously, like I said, with my dad living where he does, it's not always easy to go and see him as he's getting older and everything. There's been lots of small things that have contributed to that, I think. And I think like all these things, and personally and organisationally, it always feels a bit radical when you start, but it rapidly becomes the norm for your family, your organisation. You just do that. So I think understanding that the little changes can make a big impact collectively over time is important, and that's really reassuring just from having done this again. Like Alex, I've done it a number of times in the last few years, and that's dropped a lot from where it was initially, I'll be completely honest, and that's somebody in the climate space. So really helpful. Is there anything, I'm mindful we're nearly up to time, Jen, Alex, is there anything that you wanted to signpost people to while we're here, while we're still recording?
I'd just like to also get those dates from Simon if possible for the funded training, because then we can share it in the Carbon Neutral Cornwall newsletter. And of course, for people who are interested in what's happening on decarbonisation across Cornwall, the Carbon Neutral Cornwall team at the council has a newsletter, and we're sending that out every 2 months now. So the next issue will be in April. So that's sharing not only what the council is doing, but what organisations across Cornwall are doing. Amazing. So we're always happy to receive news items to share in that.
Yes,
fantastic.
To supply those.
And obviously this session's been about why it's so important to audit and think about your choices as an organisation. If you go back to the Green Footsteps guide, it will give you those links then to calculation tools for all those different elements, and hopefully alongside being able to get onto Simon's course for the carbon literacy. Hopefully that'll be give a really good rounded understanding, and so feeling like you're not alone in doing some of this stuff as organisations. Alex, anything you'd like to add?
Not at the moment. I just adjusted my carbon calculation just then as we were speaking. Mine's at 8 tons, which is slightly higher than it was before. But I think the UK average has actually come down quite a bit since the last time I did it.
I
think that's true. Yeah.
It's fascinating to do that, though. I think just doing that ourselves now shows actually how important it is to do that semi-regularly. So, because it makes me feel certainly, it's having an impact. Those decisions I've made has an impact, and if we're all doing that, that's quite a big impact, right? So, again, it's that teamwork approach to this stuff. I don't want people to feel alone, and because it is such an overwhelming thing as individuals and organisations, isn't it? But if we all do a little bit. What
I've often thought of doing, I don't know whether I'll ever get around to it, but if you had a mass of people, so you ask them on a given day, do your carbon footprint? Yes, thank you, great, here are my numbers. Okay, take your blood pressure, take some of your other metrics. Now do that in a year's time. And I wonder whether or not, because the suggestion is our health will improve, our cost of services would go down, and so on and so forth. And I wonder whether there is any correlation. I'll leave that for someone in a PhD someday,
Yeah, I bet there definitely is. Just for people watching, so the tool we're talking about is the WWF carbon footprint tool. It's www.footprint.wwf.org.uk/results. It's my end one, but if you just type in WWF carbon footprint calculator, that's what we're talking about. Really useful starting point for you to start thinking about your own understanding of this, and you could probably do that as an organisation as well. I know it's like geared up for a household, but you could put in organisational stuff. 'Cause I'm pretty sure I've used it for VSF before, just to get a bit of a flavour of what our impact was with our actual business space that we used to have. We now are all remote, so we've got rid of our business space as well for that reason, because it was using an awful lot of energy and carbon, but actually wasn't using a huge amount of staff time. So there's little things like that as well in terms of adapting how your organisation does things to address sustainability within your organisation as well. That might be useful.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Anything you'd like to round off with, Simon, before we go?
No, I will put some links to things. I'll share them with you, and certainly we've got one course. It's actually full of carbon literacy that is about to come up, but we're just scheduling new ones. So there's only the one on the website, and it's actually full at the moment. But we'll continue to do that. We usually market them through Eventbrite. We have actually. I sent out some papers to Manchester University from a completed course the end of last week, and I think something like 8 out of the 13 were from Cornwall Council. Just so happens.
Really helpful. Amazing. Well, thank you ever so much, everybody, for your time this morning.
Thank you.
And do go back to the Green Footsteps Guide on cornwallvsf.org if you want some more information. And thanks, everybody, for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.